At my father's funeral, my sister got the $14 million house. I got a rusted toolbox. That was the sentence everyone remembered, because my sister's husband laughed before the attorney even finished reading it. He tried to hide it behind a cough, but the room heard him. My sister heard him. I heard him. I was 61 years old, retired, widowed, and standing in a black suit that still smelled faintly of the cedar closet my wife used to keep organized. My father's ashes were not even cold. The flowers beside his photograph were still fresh, and across the mahogany conference table, my sister Denise was smiling like grief had just made her rich. The attorney looked down at the will again, as if he wished the words would change. To my daughter, Denise Houston Whitaker, I leave the main residence appraised at $14 million, including the east lawn, the guest house, and all furnishings contained therein. Denise placed one hand over her mouth, not because she was shocked, because she was trying not to grin too wide. Then the attorney turned to the page. To my son, Ralph Houston, I leave the contents of my old workshop cabinet, specifically the rusted red toolbox on the bottom shelf. Nobody spoke for 3 seconds. Then Martin laughed. My sister got the $14 million house. I got a rusted toolbox. 6 days later, I owned everything. I did not argue. I did not cry. I did not open it until I got home. That is what people never understand about humiliation. The loudest part is not always the moment it happens. Sometimes the loudest part comes afterward, when everyone else has driven away and you are sitting alone in your truck with both hands on the steering wheel, hearing the same sentence repeat in your head until it stops sounding like language. A rusted toolbox. My father had been a quiet man, and quiet men leave behind loud questions. His name was Arthur Houston. To the county, he was the old owner of the Houston estate, the stone house on the ridge with the long driveway and the iron gate everyone slowed down to look at. To bankers, he was a landholder. To lawyers, he was a complicated client. To my sister, he was leverage. To me, he had always been the man who could hear a failing engine from 2 rooms away. When I was a boy, he could stand near a tractor, close his eyes, and say, "Third cylinder skipping." And then he would hand me a wrench. Not because he needed help, because he wanted me to learn the difference between noise and signal. That was the kind of man he was. He never said, "I love you," when a lesson would do. He never hugged you if he could show you how to fix something instead. My sister hated that about him. Denise wanted warmth, applause, and visible proof. I wanted time with him, even if that time smelled like oil, metal, and sawdust. By the time we were adults, those 2 wants had turned us into different kinds of children. She became the daughter who hosted charity luncheons in rooms with polished floors. I became the son who spent Saturdays under machines. And somehow, over 40 years, the family decided that made her refined and me small. After the will reading, Denise stood in the hallway of Barlow and Finch, the estate firm my father had used since before I was married. She was wearing a black dress with pearl buttons and an expression so carefully mournful it could have been printed on a sympathy card. Martin stood behind her with his hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on expensive shoes. "Well," Denise said, "Daddy always was sentimental about that workshop." I looked at her. She had not called him Daddy in 20 years, unless there was an audience. The attorney, Mr. Barlow, stepped out of the conference room carrying a narrow cardboard box. Inside it sat the toolbox. It was smaller than I remembered. Red once, maybe. Now it was mostly brown with age, the corners blistered with rust, the handle worn down to dull metal. A strip of old masking tape clung to one side, but the writing on it had faded into yellow ghosts. Mr. Barlow held it with both hands, like it weighed more than it should.
"Ralph," he said softly, "your father was very specific."
Denise's eyes moved from the box to me.
"Don't look so wounded," she said. "You never cared about the house anyway."
That was the first lie. I had cared about the house. I just did not worship it. There is a difference. The Houston house was not just a mansion. It was a record of my father's entire life. He bought the original farmhouse after my mother died, rebuilt it stone by stone, added the east wing, restored the barn, planted the maple line along the drive, and paid off every debt without letting anyone see him sweat. To Denise, the house was a trophy. To me, it was a machine. Every system in that place had a memory. The boiler in the basement had to be tapped twice before winter. The breaker panel in the old laundry room was labeled in my handwriting from 1987. The pump house behind the creek needed priming if the pressure dropped. The west attic windows stuck in August because the frame swelled in heat. I knew that house in ways Denise never would. But the will said she owned it, and I owned a rusted toolbox. Martin leaned toward me. "Guess your retirement plan just got lighter," he said. Denise gave him a look, but not the kind that meant stop. The kind that meant not here. I took the box from Mr. Barlow. It was heavier than it looked. For 1 second, the weight of it passed through my wrists and into my chest. I remembered being 12 years old, watching my father carry that same toolbox across the yard while rain came down sideways. The well pump had failed. Denise was inside crying because the power was out. I was holding the flashlight. My father said, "Don't point it where I'm looking. Point it where I'm going to look next." I had not understood then. I understood later. That was how he taught everything. Never where the problem was, always where the problem would be. "Ralph," Mr. Barlow said. I realized I had been staring at the toolbox. "Yes," I said. "Thank you." Denise blinked, almost disappointed. She had wanted anger. Anger would have made the room easier for her. If I shouted, she could call me bitter. If I cried, she could pity me. If I accused her, she could tell everyone grief had made me unstable. But I did not give her anything useful. I carried the toolbox down the hall. Behind me, Martin's voice followed. "Careful! Might be worth $20 on eBay." Denise laughed once, a small laugh, sharp enough to cut. Outside, the funeral guests were still gathered on the sidewalk, speaking in those low voices people use when death is nearby but money is closer. Cousins I had not seen in years looked at the box in my hands, then looked away. One of Denise's daughters whispered something to her husband. He glanced at me, then at the parking lot, and pressed his lips together. The story had already started moving through the family. Denise got the house. Ralph got a toolbox. By sundown, it would have traveled through 3 counties. By Monday, everyone would know. That was how families like ours worked. They kept secrets badly and judgments well. I put the toolbox on the passenger seat of my old Ford. The seatbelt warning began chiming because the truck thought someone was sitting there. I stared at it for a moment, then reached over and buckled the belt around the box. It was a foolish thing to do, but grief makes you gentle with strange objects. The drive from Barlow and Finch to my house took 38 minutes. I knew because I watched the clock the entire way and remembered none of the road. My house sat on the south edge of town, one story, pale siding, detached garage, narrow porch. My wife Ellen had planted lavender along the front walk before she got sick. 3 years after her funeral, it still came back every spring, stubborn and silver green. When I pulled into the driveway, I did not get out right away. The toolbox sat beside me, buckled in like a silent passenger. I thought about my father's face the last time I saw him alive. He was in the hospital then, thinner than pride should allow. His hands had trembled against the blanket. Denise had been there earlier that morning, I knew, because the nurse told me she had brought lilies and asked about final administrative matters. That phrase stayed with me, final administrative matters. Only Denise could turn a deathbed into paperwork. When I visited, my father had not wanted to talk about the estate. He had asked about my truck. He asked whether the left rear wheel still pulled in wet weather. He asked if I had replaced the cracked vise in my garage. He asked if Ellen's lavender was still alive. Then he said, "When the time comes, don't react too fast." I thought he meant to his death. I thought he meant grief. Now I wondered if he had meant the will. The garage smelled like cold concrete and old wood. I set the toolbox on the workbench and stood there with my hands resting on either side of it. My own tools hung neatly on the pegboard above the bench, wrenches arranged by size, screwdrivers in a magnetic strip, pliers in a drawer lined with green felt because Ellen had once said, "Even your tools look like they're waiting for inspection." She was right. I had spent a lifetime making order out of stubborn things. Machines made sense to me. Pipes, valves, gears, relays, pressure systems, load-bearing beams, old electrical runs that should have been replaced 20 years ago. They all had rules. They all told the truth eventually. People were harder. Family was hardest. I reached for the toolbox latch, then I stopped. I heard Denise's laugh again, not loud, small, sharp. I took my hand away. My father had said not to react too fast, so I did not open it. Instead, I made coffee I did not drink. I took off my suit jacket. I loosened my tie. I sat at the kitchen table until the room darkened around me and the windows turned black. At 7:16 p.m., my phone rang. Denise. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Yes?" "Ralph," she said, with a sigh already built into my name. "I wanted to check on you." "No, you didn't." Silence. Then her voice cooled. "There's no reason to be ugly." "I'm not." "I know today was difficult." "Dad died, Denise. That's the difficult part." She ignored that. "Martin and I are going to the house tomorrow morning. There are documents to review, locks to change, insurance people to call. I assume you understand we'll need the workshop cleared out." I looked toward the garage door. "The workshop?" "Yes. Daddy's old workshop. It's on the property, Ralph." I closed my eyes. The workshop behind the Houston house was older than the East Wing, older than the guest house, older than Denise's idea that everything with a roof could be converted into a value statement. My father had built half his life in that workshop. I had learned almost everything useful there. "You're changing the locks before he's been gone 48 hours? "We have responsibilities now." "You have a house now." Her breath sharpened. "That house is part of the estate." "Not according to today. According to today, it's yours." "And the workshop sits on my land." There it was. My land. Not Dad's land, not the family's, not even the estate's.
hers. Grief had barely left the driveway, and ownership had already moved in.
"What do you want?" I asked. "I want this to stay civil." "No, you want me to stay quiet." "Ralph, say what you called to say." Another silence, this one longer. "We need you to remove anything of yours from the workshop by Friday." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because Friday was 6 days away, 6 days after the will reading. The number landed somewhere in me, then settled. "My things?" I asked. "Old parts, equipment, whatever Daddy let you keep there. Martin thinks some of it may be hazardous." "Martin thinks a torque wrench is hazardous if it has instructions." "Do not start." I didn't. "You know what I mean." I opened my eyes and looked at the dark shape of the garage through the kitchen wall, as if I could see the toolbox sitting there. "Friday," I said. "Yes? And after Friday?" "After Friday, anything remaining will be considered abandoned." I leaned back in the chair. My father's voice returned to me. "Don't react too fast." "All right," I said. Denise sounded surprised. "All right? I heard you." "That's it?" "That's it." She waited, probably for the anger she believed she was owed. When it did not come, she filled the space herself. "I know you're hurt," she said, "but Daddy made his choices. We all have to accept them." That was the second lie. Denise did not accept choices. She arranged them until they benefited her, then called the arrangement destiny. "Good night," I said. I hung up before she could bless me with more sympathy. For a long time I sat without moving. Then I went to the garage. The toolbox was exactly where I had left it, under the yellow work light, its rusted lid catching a thin line of brightness along the edge. I stood in front of it and thought about Friday. 6 days. Denise wanted the workshop cleared in 6 days. She believed she had inherited the house, the land, the workshop, the driveway, the maples, the guest house, the east lawn, the old barn, the creek path, the pump house, and every memory that came with them. She believed I had been given a consolation prize. Maybe she was right. Maybe my father, at the end of his life, had looked at both his children and decided I needed only rust. But that thought did not fit the man I knew. My father was not sentimental with objects, unless the object had a function. He did not keep broken things because they were old. He kept them because they were waiting. I touched the top of the toolbox. Cold, rough, real. There were scratches across the lid, some random, some straight. I ran my thumb along one of them and remembered my father's hands guiding mine over a metal plate when I was 14. "Don't force it," he had said. "If a thing was built by a careful man, it will show you how it opens." I almost opened it then. Almost. But something stopped me. Not fear. Pattern. The latch had fresh wear. That should not have been possible. The box looked abandoned. The paint was shot. The corners were eaten by rust. But the latch, under the grime, had a narrow silver shine where metal had rubbed against metal recently. Someone had opened this box. Not 30 years ago. Recently. My father's hands had trembled in the hospital, but they had not forgotten how to work a latch. I took a step back. Then I did something I had done all my life when a machine gave me one clue, but not the whole answer. I waited. I left the toolbox closed. The next morning, Denise sent a text at 8:03. "Please remember, workshop deadline is Friday at 5 p.m. Martin will have the locks changed after. No, good morning. No, how are you? No, I miss Dad. Just deadline, locks, control. I did not respond. Instead, I drove to the Houston estate. The gate was open when I arrived, which bothered me more than it should have. My father had always kept it closed, not because he feared thieves, but because he believed boundaries should be visible. The driveway curved under the maples, their early autumn leaves turning gold at the edges. At the top of the ridge, the house rose out of the morning light like a stone ship. 3 stories, slate roof, tall windows, white columns. Denise had once called outdated until a magazine photographer said they were timeless. There were already 2 cars near the front steps. Denise's black Mercedes, Martin's silver Range Rover. I parked by the old workshop. It sat behind the main house, half hidden by cedar trees, with a corrugated roof and double wooden doors my father had rebuilt twice. The padlock was still the same one, brass body, steel shackle, a gouge on the left side from the winter of 1999 when it froze and I had to heat the key with a lighter. I unlocked it from memory. Inside, the air was colder than outside. The workshop smelled exactly as it had when I was 17. Mineral spirits, sawdust, iron, old paper, the faint sweetness of machine oil soaked into wood. Sunlight came through the high windows in pale squares, catching dust that moved slowly, like the room was breathing. For a moment, I forgot Denise. I forgot the will. I forgot the toolbox. I saw my father standing at the long bench, sleeves rolled to his elbows, pencil behind one ear, saying, "Measure twice if you're proud, 3 times if it matters." The room was not messy. My father had been too disciplined for that. But it was full. Shelves of labeled jars, old drafting tubes, wooden drawers with brass pulls, a drill press, a lathe under a canvas cover, stacked boxes of documents tied with string, a metal cabinet against the far wall. The bottom shelf of that cabinet had an empty rectangle in the dust. The toolbox had sat there. For how long, I did not know. I crouched and looked at the shelf. The dust around the empty space was thick, undisturbed. But at the back of the shelf, behind where the toolbox had been, there was a mark on the wall. 4 small pencil lines. Not words, not numbers, just 4 vertical marks close together. My father's counting marks. He used to make them when he was testing cycles on old equipment. 4 marks meant 4 confirmations. Not 1 guess, not 2 hints. 4 signs before action. I stared at them until my knees hurt. Then I heard Denise's voice behind me.
"I thought you'd come early."
I stood slowly. She was in the doorway, holding a paper coffee cup and wearing sunglasses too large for grief. Martin stood beside her. He looked around the workshop with open dislike, as if dust were a personal insult. "Morning," I said. Denise stepped inside and wrinkled her nose. "I forgot how much it smells in here." "It smells like Dad." Her mouth tightened. "It smells like chemicals." Martin walked to the lathe and lifted the canvas cover with 2 fingers. "Is any of this valuable?" "That depends who's using it," I said. He smiled. "I mean in dollars." "So did I." Denise removed her sunglasses. "Ralph, we don't need this to be tense." "It got tense when you gave me 6 days to clear out a dead man's workshop." Her eyes hardened, but her voice stayed soft. Denise had mastered that trick. She could make cruelty sound like scheduling.
We're trying to move quickly because the property is significant. There will be appraisers, insurers, probably security consultants. Martin has ideas for the space." "Does he?" Martin nodded toward the room. "Guest gym, wine storage."
"Maybe tear it down and build a pool house." I looked at him. My father had rebuilt a well pump in this room during a thunderstorm. He had designed irrigation for half the lower orchard on that bench. He had made my mother's cedar chest here after she died, because he said grief needed somewhere to put its hands. And Martin wanted wine storage. Denise must have seen something in my face because she stepped between us. "You can take what's yours," she said. "But we need written confirmation by Friday that you have no further claim to anything on the property." I turned to her. "No further claim?" "It's standard." "No, it's not." Martin folded his arms. "Ralph, don't make this difficult." I almost answered. Then I saw it. On the workbench behind Denise near the old vise, there was a small, clean square in the dust. Something had been removed, recently, about the size of an envelope. My eyes moved to the drawers beneath the bench. The third drawer had not been closed all the way. My father would never leave a drawer open. Denise was still talking.
"Mr. Barlow said the will is clear. The residence and all furnishings contained therein are mine. We're not debating that."
"No," I said. She blinked.
"We're not?"
"No." Martin looked relieved in the smug way only fools look relieved before a door opens under them.
"Good," he said. "Then we understand each other."
I looked around the workshop one more time. The empty space in the cabinet, the 4 pencil marks, the clean square on the bench, the open drawer. 4 signs. My father had taught me not to react too fast, but he had also taught me not to ignore a pattern once it completed. I picked up an old cardboard box near the door and placed 3 rusted clamps inside it. Then I added a cracked level, a jar of washers, and a coil of wire I did not need. Denise watched me. "That's all?" "For today." "You have until Friday." "I heard you the first time." I carried the box outside. Before I reached my truck, Martin called after me. "Hey, Ralph!" I turned. He stood in the workshop doorway, smiling. "Don't forget your inheritance." Denise laughed again. Same small laugh, same sharp edge. I looked at both of them and said nothing. Because the truth was, for the first time since the will reading, I no longer felt humiliated. I felt curious. And curiosity, in a man like me, had always been more dangerous than anger. That night I returned to my garage. I placed the useless box of clamps on the floor and stood in front of the rusted toolbox. The latch still showed that thin silver line of recent use. I turned on the brighter work lamp, then I went inside, washed my hands, took my father's old magnifying glass from the desk drawer and came back. If a thing was built by a careful man, it will show you how it opens. I bent over the toolbox and studied it the way my father had taught me to study a failed part, not as an object, as a message. The rust was real, the dents were real, the worn corners were real. But along the bottom edge, beneath a ridge of grime, there was a seam that did not belong to the original box. A second floor, a false bottom. My breath slowed. I did not open it yet. I wanted to. My fingers were already on the latch. But for one more moment, I let the room hold still. Because once I opened that box, my father would either become smaller than I believed or larger than I had ever understood. I lifted the latch. The sound was soft, metal against metal. The lid opened halfway, then stuck. Inside were ordinary things. A cracked wooden handle from an old hammer, 2 dull drill bits, a folded rag stiff with oil, a small wrench I recognized from my father's tractor kit. Nothing worth laughing over, nothing worth hiding. I removed each item carefully and placed it on the bench in a straight line. Then I pressed my thumb against the bottom panel. It did not move. I pressed again. Nothing. I almost smiled. "Fine," I whispered. "Not there." I tilted the box toward the light. On the left interior wall near the back corner, a dot of rust was darker than the rest. Too round, too centered. I took a narrow punch from my drawer and pressed it. Click. The bottom panel rose less than a quarter inch. My throat tightened. I slid 2 fingers under the edge and lifted. Beneath the false bottom was a black velvet pouch, a folded note, and a single brass key. Not a house key, not a padlock key. A bank vault key. For the first time all day I sat down. The note was folded once. My father's handwriting was on the outside. Ralph. Just my name. No explanation, no apology. I opened it. 4 words. Finish what we started. I read them once, then again, then a third time. And suddenly the workshop, the house, the will, Denise's laugh, Martin's smile, the 6-day deadline, the empty space in the dust, the 4 pencil marks, all of it shifted, not into an answer, into a map. My father had not left me a rusted toolbox. He had left me instructions. And Friday was not Denise's deadline anymore. It was mine. I did not sleep much that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the bank vault key in front of me and my father's note beside it, both of them lit by the small lamp Ellen used to call the interrogation light because it made everything look guilty. The key had a number stamped near the bow, 417. No bank name, no branch code, just 3 digits and the kind of weight that told me it opened something no one was supposed to touch casually. I turned it over in my fingers for nearly an hour, looking for marks, scratches, hints, anything that might tell me where to take it. Nothing. My father had trusted me with the key, but he had not made it easy. That was like him. Arthur Houston never handed you a solution. He handed you a problem with the right tool nearby. At 2:40 in the morning, I remembered the clean square on his workbench. Something the size of an envelope had been removed. If Denise had taken it, then she had part of the puzzle. If Martin had taken it, he would not know what he had. If my father had removed it before he died, then it was somewhere else. I got up, pulled a sweater over my shirt, and went to the garage again. The old toolbox sat open on the workbench. I looked at the empty, hidden compartment and ran my fingers around the inside edges. There was nothing else under the panel, no second note, no document, no photograph. But when I lifted the black velvet pouch, I noticed the bottom had a stiffness to it. I took a seam ripper from Ellen's old sewing tin, cut along the inside seam, and slid out a narrow strip of yellowed paper folded into thirds. My father had hidden a note inside the thing that held the key. Careful men hide important things where impatient men stop looking. The paper was not a letter. It was a list. 4 lines written in pencil. Barlow knows the date. Mercer knows the room. Leland knows the map. You know the machine. I stared at those 4 lines for a long time,
Barlow I knew. Mr. Barlow, the attorney.
Mercer? Maybe the bank? Leland I did not know. The machine I understood least of all, and most of all at the same time. My father used the word machine broadly. A tractor was a machine. A pump was a machine. A house was a machine. A family could be one too, if the parts kept hurting each other in the same predictable way. I copied the 4 lines onto a clean sheet of paper, then put the original strip back inside the pouch and taped the seam lightly so it looked untouched. I did not know who I could trust yet. I only knew my father had named 3 people and 1 thing, and he had given me 6 days to understand why. At 9 the next morning, I called Barlow and Finch. The receptionist put me on hold for less than 10 seconds before Mr. Barlow picked up himself. "Ralph," he said, "I was expecting your call." That sentence sent a cold line down my back. "Were you?" "Your father said you would call when you were ready." I looked at the key on the table. Ready for what? Mr. Barlow did not answer right away. I heard papers move on his desk. Then he said, "Not over the phone. Denise is pushing me to sign something by Friday. Do not sign anything your sister gives you." His voice changed when he said it, not louder, sharper. "Do you understand me?" "I understand." "And do not tell her you spoke to me." "Why?" "Because your father spent the last 3 years making sure the wrong person could inherit the wrong thing without inheriting the right one." I sat very still. "Mr. Barlow, I need plain words." "Plain words are dangerous before the documents are in the room." "Then tell me where the room is." Another pause. "Farmers and Merchants Bank, downtown branch, private vault level. Ask for Evelyn Mercer. Take identification. Take the key. Come alone." "When?" "Today, if you can." I looked at the clock. 9:07. "I can." "Good. And Ralph?" "Yes?" "Your father was not punishing you." I swallowed. My throat had gone dry. "Then what was he doing?" Mr. Barlow exhaled slowly. "Protecting what Denise would have sold before she understood it." The line went quiet after that. Not dead, just full. I wanted to ask 10 more questions, but the old lawyer had already given me the shape of the answer. My father had known Denise. He had known Martin. He had known me. And he had built something around all 3 of us. Farmers and Merchants Bank still occupied the same limestone building on Alder Street, where my father had taken me when I was 15 to open my first savings account. The brass doors were polished. The floors were marble. The tellers spoke softly behind glass, as if money slept better when people whispered around it. I walked to the reception desk and asked for Evelyn Mercer. The young woman looked at my face, then at the old brass key in my hand, and her expression changed just enough to tell me the key meant something here. She made 1 phone call. 2 minutes later, an older woman in a navy suit appeared from the corridor behind the lobby. She had silver hair cut at her jaw and eyes that seemed to measure more than they looked at. "Mr. Houston?" "Yes?" "I'm Evelyn Mercer." She extended her hand. "I knew your father for 32 years. That almost undid me more than sympathy would have. Not, I handled his accounts. Not, he was a client. I knew your father. I shook her hand. He left me a key. I know. She looked past me toward the lobby doors. Did anyone come with you? No. Did anyone follow you?
I don't think so. Then let's not stand where glass can see us. She led me down a side hall to an elevator that required her key card and a code. We descended without speaking. The doors opened into a cooler hallway with concrete walls, security cameras, and a metal door at the end. Evelyn stopped before the door and turned to me. "Before we go in, Mr. Houston, I need to ask whether your sister has contacted you about signing any waiver, release, transfer, acknowledgement, or property access document." "She said she needs written confirmation by Friday that I have no further claim to anything on the property." Evelyn's mouth tightened. "Of course she did." "What does that mean?" "It means your father predicted her accurately." Everyone keeps saying things like that.
Because everyone who helped him is bound by professional caution until you open what he left. She gestured toward the key in my hand.
"That is not the whole inheritance. It is permission to see the inheritance." The metal door unlocked with a heavy sound that seemed to move through my ribs. Inside was a private viewing room with a steel table, 2 chairs, and a wall of safe deposit boxes behind another gate. Evelyn took my key, matched it with a guard key, and opened box 417. She carried it to the table with both hands. It was long, black, and heavier than its size suggested. She placed it in front of me. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be just outside." "You're not staying?" "Your father's instruction was that you open it alone first." Alone first. Not alone always. I nodded, and Evelyn left the room. The door closed behind her. For a few seconds I did nothing. I listened to the air conditioning. I listened to my own breathing. Then I lifted the lid.
Inside the box were 5 things. A sealed envelope with my name on it, a bundle of old survey maps tied with blue ribbon, a small ledger with a cracked brown cover, a photograph of my father and me standing beside the workshop when I was about 16, and a second key, smaller than the first, taped to a card that read, "West Pump Room, Lower Cabinet." I picked up the photograph first. I do not know why. In the picture, my father was younger than I had allowed myself to remember. Thick arms, work shirt, hair still mostly dark. I was skinny, serious, and holding a wrench like it was a legal document. Behind us, half built on the bench, was some kind of metal assembly I did not immediately recognize. My father had written on the back, "First Proof." Ralph saw it before I did. I sat down because my legs had weakened. Ralph saw it before I did. My father had never said that to me, not once. He had corrected me, trained me, challenged me. He had told me when I was wrong, before I finished being wrong. But he had kept a photograph saying I saw something before he did. I placed it carefully on the table and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, 4 pages long, written in my father's hand. The first line was not, "Dear Ralph." It was not, "Son." It was not an apology. It said, "If you are reading this, then Denise did what I expected, and you did not." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I could hear him. Not the hospital version of him, thin and tired, but the workshop version, stern and steady, standing at the bench with a pencil behind one ear. I opened my eyes and read, "Ralph, if you are reading this, then Denise did what I expected, and you did not. She took the visible thing. You carried the useful thing. I know how that sounds. I know it may have hurt you, and if it did, I am sorry. But a clean transfer requires a clean test. Your sister was not tested by grief. She was tested by ownership. I needed to know whether she would protect the land or consume it. I had my answer before I died, but the law requires more than a father's disappointment. It requires sequence, signatures, dates, and conduct. That is why I left her the house, not the estate, the house. Read that twice, not the estate, the house. The residence is valuable, but it is also the smallest visible piece of what the Houston family holds. The land under it, the water rights beneath it, the mineral lease on the North Ridge, the timber easement, the conservation trust, the orchard company, the access road, the pump infrastructure, the old rail spur, and the voting shares connected to the Houston Family Holding Company are not furnishings. They are not decorations. They are not included in the residence. Denise never asked the difference. You always knew the difference, even when you did not know the names for it. The documents in this box will begin the process. Barlow will explain the legal structure. Mercer will confirm the accounts. Leland will show you the map. But none of them can finish it. Only you can. Because the final proof is not in a lawyer's office or a bank. It is in the machine we built before your mother died, the one I told everyone failed. It did not fail. I shut it down. I shut it down because money makes people stupid, and sudden money makes family dangerous. If Denise signs what I believe she will sign, and if Martin attempts to force your release by Friday, they will trigger the clause I wrote for exactly that purpose. Do not warn them. Do not threaten them. Do not perform anger for people who feed on it. Let them choose, in writing. Then bring Barlow the maps, the ledger, the pump room key, and the proof from the machine. You will know it when you see it. Finish what we started. Dad. I read the letter twice before I touched anything else. The words blurred halfway through the second reading, and I had to remove my glasses and press my fingers against my eyes. I had come to the bank expecting money, maybe an account, maybe some forgotten bond or a document that would explain the insult. I had not expected my father to speak to me like this from the other side of death. She took the visible thing. You carried the useful thing. That was my father. That was his entire life in one sentence. Denise had taken the mansion because it looked like victory. I had carried the toolbox because I had been trained to carry weight without applause. I unfolded the survey maps next. They were old, some copied, some original, marked in different inks across several decades. The Houston property was larger than most people knew. The stone house sat on the ridge, but the estate webbed outward through adjoining parcels, easements, underground lines, access roads, and agreements with names I had heard at dinner as a child without understanding their value. North Ridge Mineral Lease, Lower Orchard Water Cooperative, Houston Timber Holdback, East Creek Conservation Trust, Rail Spur Access Option, Pump House Utility Corridor. My sister had inherited the house, but the house sat inside a system, and the system, if my father's letter was right, had not been given to her at all. The small ledger made my hands feel colder. Inside, in my father's square handwriting, were dates, initials, payments, repairs, pressure readings, land markers, and references to something called HFC voting block. HFC. Houston Family Company, maybe, or Holding Company, like the letter said. The entries went back years. Some were practical, replaced north pump seal, checked lower valve, cleared access grate. Others were stranger. D.W. asked about sale again. M.W. pushing realtor contact. Denise believes East Lawn includes corridor. Letter. That last line made me stop. Letter. My father had known. He had known Denise misunderstood what she was getting. Or maybe he had allowed her to misunderstand because correcting her would have taught her how to steal better. Evelyn knocked once before entering. I must have been in the room longer than I realized. "Are you ready for Mr. Barlow?" she asked. I looked up. "He's here?" "He's been upstairs for 20 minutes. "You called him?" "Your father scheduled him." I almost laughed, but it came out too tired. Of course he did. Evelyn's expression softened. "Arthur was exacting." "That's a polite word." "It is the bank word." I gathered the letter, maps, ledger, photograph, and pump room key back into the box. "Mrs. Mercer, did my father ever tell you what this was really about?" She looked at the box, then at me. "He said it was about whether a family keeps faith with what built it." "And if it doesn't?" "Then he wanted the person who understood the machinery to take the controls." I carried the box upstairs myself. Mr. Barlow was waiting in a private office off the main lobby, sitting with a leather folio on his knees. He looked older than he had at the will reading. Or maybe I was finally seeing the weight he had been carrying. Evelyn closed the office door behind us. Mr. Barlow did not offer small talk. He opened his folio and placed a copy of the will on the desk. "Before we begin," he said, "I need to know exactly what Denise asked you to sign." "She hasn't given me the paper yet. She said by Friday." "Good. That means we still have the sequence intact." Everyone keeps using that word. "Because sequence is everything here." He turned the will toward me and tapped the paragraph concerning Denise. "Your sister inherited the main residence, the east lawn, the guest house, and furnishings contained therein. That is a generous bequest. It is also very narrow." He turned another page. "The residue of the estate, meaning everything not specifically devised, flows through the Houston Family Holding Company, the Conservation Trust, and several instruments your father revised over the last 3 years. You are named successor manager of the holding company, conditional trustee of the land instruments, and controlling vote on the non-residential assets, provided certain conditions are satisfied." "Conditions?" I said. "Yes." "Friday?" Mr. Barlow looked at me over the top of his glasses. "Possibly." "What happens Friday?" "That depends on what your sister does." "And if she does what Dad expected?" "Then she will prove, in writing, that she intended to dispossess you from assets she does not own, pressure you into abandoning claims she knew or should have known were unresolved, and interfere with estate property before inventory is complete." "That sounds serious." "It is. But does it give me the house?" He leaned back. "Not directly." For a second, disappointment moved through me before I could stop it. Mr. Barlow saw it. "Ralph, listen carefully. Your sister received the house, but the house carries obligations, tax obligations, maintenance obligations, access obligations, utility dependencies, insurance dependencies, historic restrictions, easements, and certain buyback provisions tied to the family holding company if the residence owner violates the governing covenant." "The governing covenant?" "Your father wrote it after your mother died.
He tapped the file. He understood the difference between owning a house and controlling an estate. My father's words returned. Read that twice. Not the estate. The house. So Denise has the mansion? I said slowly. But not the land system around it? Correct. Not the water? Correct. Not the access road? Shared and conditioned. Not the workshop? Barlow's eyes sharpened. That is one of the questions your father expected her to get wrong. I sat forward. She said the workshop sits on her land. It does not. What? The workshop sits on a utility parcel carved out in 1982 and transferred to the holding company in 1996.
It visually appears to belong to the residents. Legally, it does not. I thought of Denise standing in the doorway, telling me Martin had ideas for the space. Guest gym, wine storage, pool house.
She threatened to change the locks.
If she does, document it.
Why didn't Dad just tell her? Mr. Barlow folded his hands. Because your father believed Denise had spent 40 years listening only when information benefited her. He wanted her choices recorded without the benefit of correction. That was harsh. It was also true enough to hurt.
I left the bank with copies, instructions, and a heavier understanding of the next 4 days. Mr. Barlow told me not to confront Denise, not to explain the structure, not to hint that the workshop was not hers, and not to sign anything without him present. Evelyn gave me a plain folder and said, "Keep this out of your truck if you stop anywhere." The bank vault box stayed at the bank, but I carried the photograph with me. I do not know why. Maybe because documents could tell me what my father planned, but the photograph told me why it mattered. First, proof. Ralph saw it before I did. I drove home by the long route, avoiding the Houston estate. Halfway back, my phone buzzed. Denise again. I let it go to voicemail. Then came a text. Martin has drafted a simple release. We can meet Thursday instead of Friday, if that helps. I stared at the message while sitting at a red light. Thursday instead of Friday. She was accelerating. That meant something had frightened her or tempted her. Maybe she had found the open drawer in the workshop and realized something was missing. Maybe Martin had spoken to a realtor. Maybe both. I typed one word, Thursday. Then I deleted it. My father's instruction was clear. Do not react too fast. I put the phone down and drove home. When I reached my house, a white envelope was tucked under the storm door. No stamp, no address, hand delivered. My name was written on the front in block letters I did not recognize. Inside was a photocopy of a property sketch, old and faint, with the workshop circled in red. Beneath it, someone had written, "Ask Leland where the line really runs." There was no signature. I stood on my porch with the envelope in my hand and looked out at the quiet street. A dog barked 2 houses down. A delivery truck passed slowly. Nothing seemed unusual. But someone knew I had gone to the bank. Or someone had been waiting for the key to move. Leland knows the map. That was the 3rd line from my father's hidden list. I went inside, locked the door, and called Mr. Barlow. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Did your father mention someone named Leland?" I asked. "Thomas Leland," he said. "Retired county surveyor." I just got a note telling me to ask him where the line really runs. Mr. Barlow was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Do not ignore that, he said finally.
Do you know where he is?
Yes.
Then go tomorrow morning. Why tomorrow? Well, because if Denise is moving the release to Thursday, she or Martin may try to secure the workshop before then. But you said it isn't hers. People break locks before they understand deeds. I looked toward the garage, toward the rusted toolbox, toward the false bottom that had turned my father's insult into a warning. Mr. Barlow, I said, what is in the pump room? He did not answer directly. Your father said you would remember when you saw it. Well, that's not helpful. No, he said quietly, but it is what he trusted. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with the new note, the copy of the map, the bank folder, and the photograph spread in front of me. Barlow knows the date. Mercer knows the room. Leland knows the map. You know the machine.
3 people had now stepped out of my father's past, like hidden switches in a circuit. The attorney, the banker, the surveyor, and then there was me, the engineer, the son, the one everyone thought had received nothing because they had never known how to measure what I had been given. That night, I dreamed of the old pump house, not the workshop, not the mansion, the pump house behind the creek where the ground dipped and the air stayed damp even in August. In the dream, I was 17 again, standing beside my father while rain hammered the tin roof. He was tightening a valve with both hands, grunting from the effort, and I was holding the flashlight wrong. "Not there," he said. "Where next?" I moved the beam. It landed on a gauge mounted behind the main pipe. The needle trembled. My father stopped turning the valve and looked at the gauge. Then he looked at me. "You saw that?" he asked. I nodded. Pressure dropped before the seal moved. He smiled then, a rare thing. Small, quick, almost gone before I could trust it. "Good," he said. "Remember that. A system tells the truth before people do." I woke before dawn with that sentence in my mouth. A system tells the truth before people do. I got dressed in the dark, put the pump room key in my pocket, and placed the bank folder under the loose floorboard in Ellen's old closet. Then I drove to find Thomas Leland. Leland lived in a small brick house near the county line, the kind of place you would miss if you were looking for wealth instead of knowledge. A faded survey marker hung beside his front door like a decoration only 3 people in the county would recognize. He opened before I knocked twice. He was in his 80s, thin as a fence rail, with white hair combed straight back and suspenders over a plaid shirt. His eyes went immediately to my face. "You're Arthur's boy," he said. "Ralph." "You took your time." "I didn't know I was supposed to come." "That's usually how Arthur worked." He stepped aside. "Come in." His living room was full of maps, not framed nicely, but stacked, rolled, clipped, weighted, and pinned. County plats, drainage plans, old railroad rights-of-way, soil sheets, aerial photographs. The room looked less like a home than a memory of land before people lied about it. Leland walked to a dining table already cleared, except for one large, rolled map. "Your sister been at you yet?" he asked. "Yes." "Her husband?" "More than her." "Figures." He unrolled the map and weighted the corners with coffee mugs. It was a survey of the Houston property, but not the simplified version I had seen in tax records. This one was dense with lines, notations, easements, parcels, dates, and handwritten corrections. Leland pointed to the stone house. "This is what your sister got." His finger moved around the residence, east lawn, and guest house.
Pretty, expensive, tax-heavy. Everyone sees it. Then his finger moved west, past the driveway, past the tree line, to a narrow rectangle behind the workshop. This is what she thinks she got. He tapped the workshop. She didn't. Barlow told me it's on a utility parcel. Barlow reads paper. I drew the line. Leland's finger traced the boundary. Workshop, pump corridor, lower access path, and west utility line all belong to Houston Family Holding.
Residence owner has limited use, only as long as they do not interfere with operations. Operations of what? Leland looked at me, and for the first time his face changed. Not fear, exactly. Respect, maybe. Or caution. Arthur didn't tell you? He left clues. Of course he did. Leland walked to a cabinet and removed a second map, older than the first, the paper almost cloth-like. He spread it carefully over the newer survey. Before your father built the east wing, before he restored the barn, before anyone cared what that house was worth, the Houston land had a water system running under it. Springs on the ridge, creek intake below, storage vault under the pump room, distribution line through the orchard, overflow tied to the old rail grade. Most folks thought it was just farm infrastructure. Your father knew better. Better how? Water made that land valuable before the house did. Later came the mineral lease, then the timber holdback, then the conservation credits. But the spine of it was the water. Whoever controls the pump corridor and the operating company controls what the mansion depends on. I stared at the map. Lines I had ignored as a young man now looked like arteries. And Denise doesn't know? Leland snorted. Denise never asked about anything underground. He tapped the red-circled workshop on the note I had brought. Arthur was worried she'd sell the house to a developer who would try to force access, break the covenant, and strip the land around it. He built the structure so greed would reveal itself before it could do damage. And Martin? Men like Martin don't see land. They see liquidation. What am I supposed to do with this? Leland rolled up the old map and tied it with string. You're supposed to go to the pump room. What's there? The part only you'll understand. Why me? Leland's eyes sharpened. Because according to your father, you were the one who noticed the pressure drop before the seal moved. The dream came back so suddenly I had to steady myself on the table. He told you that? Arthur told everyone who mattered, just not you. Leland handed me the rolled map. He was proud of you, Ralph. Too stubborn to say it right, but proud. I looked away because there are some kindnesses a man cannot receive while standing. Leland pretended not to notice. One more thing, he said. If your sister tries to lock the workshop, let her. If she tries to tear it down, call Barlow immediately. If she signs that release while claiming the workshop is hers, the covenant bite gets teeth. You make it sound like Dad built a trap. Leland shook his head. No. A trap catches the innocent by surprise. Arthur built a gate. Only greed closes it. By the time I left Leland's house, the sun had climbed over the fields and turned the road white. The rolled map lay on the passenger seat where the toolbox had sat 2 days earlier. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and one eye on the rear-view mirror. No one followed me, or if they did, they were better at it than I expected. My phone buzzed 3 times on the drive. Denise, Martin, Denise again. I did not answer. When I reached my house, Martin's Range Rover was parked at the curb. He was standing on my porch, looking at the lavender like it had offended him. I slowed, then pulled into the driveway. He smiled when I got out. "Busy morning?" he asked. "Some." His eyes moved to the rolled map on the passenger seat. "What's that?" "Paper." "Funny." "Not usually." He stepped down from the porch. "Denise is upset." "That seems to happen when people tell her no." "No one has told her no." "Then why is she upset?" His smile thinned. "Look, Ralph, I'm trying to be decent here."
Your father left things messy. Denise is under a lot of pressure. The house has costs, taxes, insurance, security. We're trying to get everything organized before outsiders start circling.
"What outsiders?"
Developers, buyers, people who understand opportunity. There it was. Leland had been right. Men like Martin did not see land. They saw liquidation.
"I thought Denise wanted to live there."
Plans evolve.
"Dad's been dead 2 days."
And the world didn't stop.
I looked at him for a long moment. He was not grieving. He was not even pretending well. Martin had the restless brightness of a man who had already spent money he had not yet received. "What do you want?" I asked. He pulled a folded document from inside his jacket. "Just a simple acknowledgement. Saves everyone time. You confirm you received your bequest, you waive any claim to property located at the residence, and you agree not to interfere with Denise's possession." I did not take it. Denise said Thursday.
I'm here now. Why? Because this doesn't need lawyers. I almost smiled. Every sentence Martin spoke was a reason it needed lawyers. "Leave it in the mailbox." "You can sign it now." "No." His face changed. Not much, just enough. "Ralph, don't turn sentimental over a shed full of junk." "Workshop." "Fine. Workshop." "And no." He stepped closer. "Your father gave you a toolbox. That's embarrassing, I get it. But don't confuse embarrassment with entitlement." I felt something hot move behind my ribs. Not anger, exactly. Something older. The same thing I had felt as a boy when a bolt stripped and my father told me frustration was just wasted force. I let it pass through me without using it. "Put the paper in the mailbox," I said. Martin stared at me, then laughed under his breath. "Denise said you'd be difficult." "Denise says many things. Friday at 5, anything left in that workshop is abandoned." "Is that in the document?" "Yes." "Good." He blinked. "Good?" "Put it in the mailbox." For the first time since I had known him, Martin looked uncertain. Only for a second. Then he shoved the document into the mailbox hard enough to bend it and walked back to his Range Rover. Before he got in, he turned and said, "You know, Denise always said you were just like your father." I looked at him. "Thank you." He had meant it as an insult. That made it better. When Martin drove away, I waited until his vehicle turned the corner before I took the document from the mailbox. I carried it inside without opening it, placed it on the kitchen table, and called Mr. Barlow. "He brought the release early," I said. "Did you sign?" "No." "Did he leave it?" "Yes." "Read me the exact language about the workshop and abandonment." I unfolded the document. It was 3 pages, printed cleanly, with little yellow tabs where my signature was supposed to go. I read the paragraph aloud. "By signing below, Ralph Houston acknowledges that any items, equipment, papers, instruments, tools, fixtures, machines, records, or personal property remaining in or upon the residence, guest house, grounds, outbuildings, workshop, utility areas, or any appurtenant structure associated with the Houston residence after Friday at 5 p.m. shall be deemed abandoned, and Denise Houston Whitaker shall have full authority to remove, destroy, sell, transfer,
or otherwise dispose of such property without further notice. Mr. Barlow was silent. Then he said very softly, "Wonderful." "That is not the word I expected." "It is overbroad. It claims authority over property she does not own, structures she does not control, and records she has no right to destroy." "Did Martin sign anything?" "There's a cover letter." "Read the bottom." I looked. Martin Whitaker, acting on behalf of Denise Houston Whitaker, residence beneficiary. "Keep the envelope. Keep the document. Touch it as little as possible." "What now?" "Now you do not sign it. You bring it to my office after you go to the pump room." "Why after?" "Because your father's final proof may determine whether we warn them, restrain them, or let them step fully into the covenant breach." I looked toward the window. The afternoon light had gone flat and gray. "Barlow, I'm tired of not knowing the whole shape." His voice softened. "I know, but you are close." "Close to what?" "Well, to finding out whether your father built a defense or a transfer."
"What's the difference?"
"A defense protects what is yours." He paused. "A transfer makes it yours because someone else proved they could not be trusted with it." My hand tightened around the phone.
"And the machine decides that?"
"No, people decide that. The machine only tells the truth."
"A system tells the truth before people do." I closed my eyes. "I'm going to the pump room," I said. "Call me before you enter if anyone is there."
"And if no one is there?"
"Then call me after you see what your father left." He hung up first.
The Houston estate looked different that afternoon. Not physically. The house still stood at the top of the ridge, handsome and cold, its windows reflecting a sky the color of dull pewter. The maples still lined the drive, the east lawn still rolled down toward the guest house in perfect green. But once you have seen the hidden lines under a thing, you stop being fooled by its surface. I no longer saw just the mansion. I saw parcels, easements, corridors, water lines, legal arteries. My sister had inherited the face. My father had sent me looking for the bones. Denise's Mercedes was parked near the front steps, but Martin's Range Rover was gone. I drove past the house without stopping and followed the gravel service path toward the creek. The pump room sat low behind a stand of sycamores, a squat stone building with a rusted metal roof and a green door half hidden by vines. I had not been there in years, not since my father's knees got bad and he hired younger men for the heavy work. As a boy, I had hated this place. It was damp, loud, and full of things that pinched fingers. As a man, I understood it better. The pump room was where the estate admitted it was not magic. Pressure had to come from somewhere. Flow had to be regulated. Beauty upstairs depended on machinery below. I parked under the sycamores and sat for a moment with the smaller key in my hand. West pump room, lower cabinet. My father's final proof was somewhere inside. I got out, locked the truck, and walked to the green door. The old lock resisted at first, then turned with a scrape that made birds lift from the creek bank. Inside, the air was wet and metallic. Pipes ran along the walls, gauges clouded with age. A large pump assembly stood in the center, newer parts bolted onto older bones. The room hummed faintly, though I could not tell from what. There was no one inside, no footprints in the dust except old maintenance tracks. No sign Denise or Martin had been here. I closed the door behind me and turned on the overhead light. It flickered twice, then held. The lower cabinet was beneath the main control panel, exactly where the card had said it would be. The small key fit. Inside were spare seals, a coil of copper tubing, a pressure chart, and an oilcloth packet tied with string. I took the packet out and placed it on the workshelf. My hands were steady until I saw my name written on the cloth. Not Ralph. Engineer. That was when I had to sit down on an overturned crate. My father had never called me that to my face. Retired or not, successful or not, rich or not, that was what he had believed I was. Engineer. I untied the string. Inside was a set of old mechanical drawings, a stack of Polaroid photographs, a cassette tape, and a small metal plate etched with serial numbers. The drawings showed the pump system, but not the ordinary one. Beneath the current configuration was an older assembly built around a pressure diversion manifold, a water measurement device, and a sealed vault chamber under the floor. I recognized the shape from the photograph in the bank box. First proof. Ralph saw it before I did. The machine we had built before my mother died. I had been 16. I remembered pieces now. My father telling everyone the spring system failed because the pressure could not be stabilized. Me noticing that the pressure dropped before the seal moved. Him staying up 3 nights after that, redesigning the manifold. Then my mother getting sick. Then the project disappearing under tarps and silence. I had thought grief killed it. Maybe grief only buried it. The Polaroids showed the pump room floor open during construction. Beneath it was a concrete vault, not large enough for a person to stand in comfortably, but large enough to house equipment, records, maybe more. On the back of one photo my father had written, "Proof chamber dry after 27 years. Ask Ralph why." I actually laughed then. Alone in that damp pump room, holding a dead man's challenge. I laughed because my father still could not simply tell me I had done well. He had to turn praise into homework. I studied the drawings for nearly 20 minutes before I found the access point. It was not a door. It was a service plate behind the pressure gauge assembly, bolted with 4 old hex bolts painted the same gray as the wall. I had walked past it 100 times as a boy and never seen it. Or maybe I had seen it and not known what it was. 4 bolts, 4 pencil marks, 4 lines in the hidden note. My father liked confirmation. I took a wrench from the cabinet, tested the first bolt, and felt it resist. Old, but not frozen. Someone had maintained it. I loosened each bolt slowly, listening to the room as I worked. A good system tells you when you are hurting it. This one stayed quiet. When the plate came free, there was a recessed lever behind it, wrapped in oilcloth. I pulled the lever down. Somewhere beneath the floor, a latch released with a heavy clunk. The concrete slab beside the main pump rose a fraction of an inch. My pulse moved into my throat. I set the plate aside, crouched by the slab, and pulled. It was heavier than I expected, but counterweighted. My father would never build a thing one man could not open alone, if one man was the intended user. The slab lifted on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into darkness. Cool air rose from below. Dry air, not damp. That mattered. Proof chamber dry after 27 years. Ask Ralph why. I knew why before I reached the bottom. The pressure diversion manifold had not been built only to move water. It had been built to keep water away from this chamber, a hidden dry vault beneath the wettest building on the property. The kind of place no developer, appraiser, or greedy relative would think to inspect. I took the flashlight from my truck and descended. The chamber was small, concrete-walled, and impossibly clean. Not clean like a room used often, clean like a system preserved it. Shelves lined one wall, a metal cabinet stood against another. In the center was a steel table with a sealed plastic case on top. There was no treasure in the childish sense, no gold bars, no stacks of cash, no jewels wrapped in cloth. What my father had hidden was stranger and more powerful. Records, original agreements, water rights certificates, mineral lease amendments, timber contracts, holding company documents, signed covenants, maps with seals, photographs of boundary markers, maintenance logs proving continuous operation, a complete history of the estate as a working system, not a rich person's house. And on the steel table, inside the plastic case, was a video camera, a small digital recorder, and another letter. This one was addressed to 3 people: Ralph Houston, Samuel Barlow, Evelyn Mercer. I did not open it yet, because behind the case, mounted on the wall, was a framed sheet of paper, yellowed with age. At the top it read, Houston Family Holding Company, Operating Covenant, 1996. Beneath it, one paragraph had been outlined in my father's red pencil. I stepped closer and read the words slowly. If any residence beneficiary attempts to obstruct, seize, destroy, sell, transfer, or claim authority over utility parcels, operating records, water infrastructure, workshop facilities, holding company instruments, or family estate assets outside the specific residential bequest, such conduct shall constitute a hostile breach of covenant and shall activate the successor manager's right to immediate controlling authority, including residence buyback at assessed agricultural land value, recovery of costs, and suspension of beneficiary access to dependent estate systems pending legal review. I read it again. Residence buyback at assessed agricultural land value, not market value, not $14 million, agricultural land value. My sister had inherited a $14 million house that could be bought back for a fraction of its trophy price if she tried to seize what was not hers. And Martin had just put that attempt in writing. I stood there in the hidden chamber beneath the pump room, surrounded by the real inheritance. And for the first time, I understood the shape of my father's plan. The house had been bait, but not because he wanted Denise ruined. He had given her one last chance to hold something beautiful without consuming everything around it. She could have mourned, she could have waited, she could have asked what the estate needed. She could have called me and said, "Ralph, I don't understand all of Dad's systems. Will you help me protect them?" If she had done that, maybe the house would have remained hers. Maybe I would have maintained the machinery, and she would have hosted her luncheons, and my father's land would have survived us both. But she had not asked for help. She had changed the locks in her mind before the flowers wilted. She had claimed the workshop. Martin had claimed the outbuildings.
They had demanded I abandon tools, papers, instruments, machines, records, utility areas,
and appurtenant structures they had no right to touch. My father had not trapped them. He had documented who they became when they thought no one could stop them. I picked up the letter addressed to me, Barlow and Mercer. This time my father's handwriting was shorter, weaker, but clear. If Ralph has found this chamber, the machine still works, and the right person is holding the key. Sam, proceed if the hostile breach is in writing. Evelyn, release the operating records to Ralph upon Sam's confirmation. Ralph, forgive me for making you carry the insult first. I needed Denise to choose freely, and I needed you to see the system before you touched the title. You always understood pressure. You always understood that what looks strongest on the surface may depend entirely on what no one sees underneath. Do not use this to be cruel. Use it to be final. Dad. I folded the letter with both hands. Do not use this to be cruel. Use it to be final. That was when my phone rang in my pocket. Down there, under concrete and old stone, the sound was thin and strange. I looked at the screen. Denise. I let it ring. A voicemail appeared, then a text. Ralph, since you refuse to communicate, Martin is changing the workshop lock today. Anything important should already have been removed. I stared at the message. Then I took a photograph of it. My hands were no longer shaking. I climbed out of the chamber, closed the slab, reset the lever, replaced the service plate, locked the lower cabinet, and walked out into the gray afternoon with the oilcloth packet, the covenant photograph, and Martin's release document all pointing in the same direction. Friday had come early. So had the truth. I stood outside the pump room with Denise's message glowing on my phone and the gray sky pressing low over the estate. Ralph, since you refuse to communicate, Martin is changing the workshop lock today. Anything important should already have been removed. I read it once more, not because I needed the words, but because I wanted to remember the moment clearly. There are moments in life when a person tells you who they are with such precision that answering them would only weaken the evidence. Martin was changing the lock on a workshop he did not own, attached to a utility parcel Denise had not inherited, after handing me a document claiming authority over tools, machines, papers, records, utility areas, and outbuildings. My father had built a gate. Denise and Martin had just closed it from the wrong side. I took a photograph of the pump room door, the key in my hand, the service path, and the exterior of the workshop in the distance. Then I called Mr. Barlow. He answered before the second ring. "Tell me," he said. "I found the chamber." There was silence, but not surprise. "And?" "The machine works. The records are there. The covenant is there. Dad's letter says proceed if hostile breach is in writing." "Do you have the writing?" "Martin's release document. Denise's text. She says Martin is changing the workshop lock today." Mr. Barlow exhaled once. "Do not go to the workshop alone. I'm already on the property. Ralph," his voice became stern in a way that reminded me of my father, "do not confront them alone. Drive to my office now." I looked across the service path toward the roofline of the workshop. "If he changes the lock before we act?" "Let him." "You're sure?" "Yes. If you interrupt him, it becomes an argument."
If he completes the act after written notice and without authority, it becomes evidence. I understood that. Machines told the truth through pressure. People told it through choices. Bring the release.
The oilcloth packet, the covenant photograph, and your phone, Barlow said.
I'm calling Evelyn Mercer. I'm also calling the county clerk's office and Judge Halpern's chambers.
Judge?
Your father did not build a paper castle, Ralph. He built a legal engine. Now we turn it on. I looked back at the pump room one last time. Barlow?
Yes?
Did Dad know it would hurt this much? The old lawyer did not answer quickly. When he did, his voice was softer.
He knew it would hurt. He believed you were the only one who would not let the hurt make you careless. I drove away from the estate without going near the main house. That took more discipline than I expected. Part of me wanted to turn up the drive, walk into the workshop, and stand between Martin and the door with every year of swallowed insult behind me. I wanted to tell him he was standing on land he did not own, touching a lock he had no right to change, making a mistake that would cost him more than his pride. But that would have been anger, and anger was loud. My father had given me something quieter, finality. On the road into town, I passed a hardware store truck heading the other direction, with a rack of locks and hinges visible through the rear window. The driver wore a cap and tapped his fingers on the wheel. I watched the truck disappear in my mirror and knew, without proof but with certainty, that it was going to the Houston workshop. I kept driving. Mr. Barlow's office looked different in daylight than it had after the will reading. Less like a place where judgment had been delivered, more like a place where old men had stored storms in filing cabinets. Evelyn Mercer was already there when I arrived, seated beside Barlow's desk with a tablet, a leather folder, and the calm face of a woman who had spent 3 decades watching wealthy people learn that signatures were heavier than promises. Mr. Barlow stood when I entered. "Put everything here," he said, clearing the center of his desk. I laid out Martin's release, Denise's text screenshots, the oilcloth packet, the photographs from the pump room, the copy of the covenant paragraph, Leland's map, and my father's letters. Barlow did not touch the letters first. He touched the release. "Good," he said. Evelyn leaned in and read the abandonment paragraph. Her expression did not change, but one eyebrow lifted. "They included utility areas." "Yes," Barlow said. "And records." "And machines." "Yes." "That is reckless." "It is better than reckless," Barlow said. "It is specific." He turned to me. "Specific mistakes are useful." I sat in the chair across from him, suddenly aware of how tired I was. The last 3 days felt like 3 months. My father's funeral, the will, the toolbox, the workshop, the false bottom, the bank, Leland's maps, the pump room chamber, and now this office where everyone seemed to know the language of a trap I was only beginning to translate. "What happens now?" I asked. Barlow placed the release beside the covenant copy. "Now we establish breach, secure the records, notify the holding company board, file emergency notice against unauthorized interference, and send Denise a demand letter before she can claim ignorance." "What board?" Evelyn answered. "The Houston Family Holding Company has a small board on paper. Your father, Mr. Barlow, as registered secretary, 1 independent seat that has been vacant since your mother died, and a successor manager named in the governing documents." "Me." "You," she said. "Subject to activation conditions." Barlow tapped Martin's release, which they are satisfying with impressive speed. Before I could answer, Barlow's assistant knocked and opened the door. "Mr. Leland is here." I turned. Thomas Leland stepped inside carrying a cardboard tube under one arm and wearing the same plaid shirt from the morning, as if he had been expecting this day for years and saw no reason to dress differently for it. He looked at the papers on the desk, then at me. "He changed it yet?" "Probably," I said. Leland nodded. "Good." I almost laughed. Everyone keeps saying good when people do terrible things. Because terrible things done in daylight are easier to survey. He pulled a folded document from his pocket and handed it to Barlow. "Certified parcel history, workshop and pump corridor. I had the county stamp it at noon." Barlow accepted it with the satisfaction of a man seeing a gear slide into place. "Thank you, Tom." Leland sat in the chair beside me. "Arthur would have hated that lock change." "Then why let it happen?" I asked. Leland turned his weathered face toward me. "Because your father spent his life fixing things too early for people who then claimed they were never broken. This time he wanted the break recorded." That sentence stayed with me. My father had fixed too many things too early. The house, the land, the water, Denise's mistakes, maybe mine too. All those years he had been the hand under the table keeping the whole thing level while everyone else argued about who deserved the centerpiece. Barlow opened a fresh file. "Ralph, I need your authorization to act as successor manager pending formal activation." "Do I have that authority yet?" "With the evidence you brought, yes. Enough to file protective notice. Full control will require confirmation, but we can move immediately to prevent destruction or transfer." "And the house?" Barlow folded his hands. "That depends on what Denise does after notice." "Explain it to me like I'm not a lawyer." "Gladly." "Your sister owns the residence subject to the covenant. If she behaves, she keeps it, though she must respect the estate systems. If she obstructs, seizes, destroys, or claims control over non-residential estate assets, the holding company can exercise the buyback provision and take the residence back at assessed agricultural land value. If she and Martin already changed the workshop lock, that supports breach. If they attempt to remove records or equipment after notice, that strengthens it. If they sign or circulate false claims of authority, stronger still." "And Martin's release?" "A gift," Evelyn said. "An ugly gift," Barlow added, "but a gift." I looked down at the document. The yellow tabs waited for my signature like little flags planted by an invader who had not read the map. At 3:18 p.m., Mr. Barlow sent the first letter by email, courier, and certified mail. At 3:22, he filed emergency notice with the county recorder. At 3:31, Evelyn released digital copies of the operating records to a secure account under my name as provisional successor manager. At 3:40, Leland signed an affidavit stating that the workshop, pump corridor, and west utility parcel were outside the residential bequest and under holding company control. I watched it all happen from a chair in Barlow's office, holding my father's photograph in my hands. First proof. Ralph saw it before I did. When you are young, you think inheritance is what a person gives you after death: money, property, objects, a name on a document. But sitting there, I began to understand that my real inheritance had been delivered over decades in pieces so small no one else valued them. The way my father taught me to listen before touching a machine. The way he made me check the pressure twice. The way he refused to let me call a system fixed until it worked under load. The way he corrected my impatience until quiet became a tool. Denise had inherited the visible thing because she trusted visible things. I had inherited the method. And the method was now moving through paper, law, maps, keys, texts, signatures, and locked doors with the same patience my father had used in the workshop. At 3:47, Denise called me. Barlow saw her name on my phone and held out his hand. "May I?" I gave him the phone. He answered on speaker. "This is Samuel Barlow." Denise's voice came sharp and high. "Why do you have Ralph's phone?" "Because Ralph is in my office." "Of course he is. I knew he was going to make this ugly." "Denise, you have received a formal notice regarding unauthorized interference with holding company property." "What are you talking about?" Barlow's voice remained calm. "The workshop, utility parcel, pump corridor, and related operating records are not part of your residential bequest." Silence. Then she laughed. Not the small funeral laugh. A frightened laugh wearing a costume. "That is absurd." "It is recorded." "The workshop is behind my house." "It is behind the residence. That does not make it yours." "My father left me the house and grounds." "He left you the residence, east lawn, guest house, and furnishings contained therein." "That includes the property around it." "No." One syllable, clean as a blade. Denise's breathing changed. "Where is Ralph?" "Here." "Put him on." Barlow looked at me. I shook my head. "Ralph will not discuss this directly while counsel is involved." "Counsel? He is my brother." "And you sent him a release demanding abandonment of assets you do not own." Another silence. In it I could almost hear Martin standing beside her whispering. Then Denise said, "That was just to simplify things." "It did the opposite." "We haven't done anything." Barlow looked at the screenshot on his desk. "Your text states Martin is changing the workshop lock today." "For security." "On property you do not own." "This is harassment." "No, Denise. This is notice." Her voice dropped, colder now. "My father gave me that house." Barlow's eyes moved briefly to me. "Yes, and he gave you conditions." The call ended, not because Barlow hung up, because Denise did. For several seconds no one spoke. Then Leland said, "She'll blame Martin first." Evelyn closed her folder. "Then she'll blame Ralph." Barlow nodded. "Then she'll blame Arthur." They spoke with the weary accuracy of people who had seen entitlement move through all its stations. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. A text from Denise. "How dare you do this to me after Dad died?" Another followed. "You were always jealous." Then another. "You couldn't stand that he chose me." Barlow read them and nodded. "Do not answer." I did not, but I wanted to. I wanted to write. I was not jealous of a house. I was grieving a father. I wanted to write. You laughed. I wanted to write. You tried to throw me out of the one room where he taught me how to be his son. But all of those answers were human, and right now the machine needed patience. "What if she stops?" I asked. "Stops what?" Barlow said. "Stops pushing. Removes the lock. Respects the boundary. Does she keep the house?" Barlow leaned back, studying me. "Possibly." Leland looked at me with something like approval. Evelyn did too. "Why?" Barlow asked.
because Dad said not to use this to be cruel." The room changed after I said that. Not dramatically, just enough. My father's instruction had entered the office and taken a seat. Barlow nodded slowly. "Then we proceed firmly, not vindictively. We give her an opportunity to cure the breach. And if she doesn't, then we become final." At 4:12, Barlow's assistant knocked again. "Mr. Barlow, there's a call from a locksmith." Barlow raised an eyebrow. "A locksmith?" "He says he's at the Houston workshop and someone told him to change the lock, but he just received a notice from our office forwarded by Mrs. Whitaker. He wants to know who owns the door." Leland chuckled. "Smart man." Barlow took the call at his desk. "This is Samuel Barlow. State your name, please." The locksmith's voice came through faintly, nervous and practical.
He had already removed the old padlock, he said, but had not drilled or replaced anything because the woman at the house started arguing with someone on the phone and then sent him a legal notice asking if it mattered. "It matters," Barlow said. "Put the original lock back on if possible. If not, secure the door without altering it and leave the property. Send your invoice to the person who hired you." He listened, then added, "And please photograph the condition of the lock and door before leaving." When he hung up, he looked at me. They almost completed the act. Almost doesn't count? It counts less, but the release still counts. The text still counts. The attempted lock change still counts. I felt something unclench and tighten at the same time. Part of me was relieved the workshop had not been damaged. Another part of me knew Denise had just been given a chance to step back. Whether she took it would decide everything. She did not take it. At 5:06 p.m., Martin sent an email to Mr. Barlow and copied me. It was written in the stiff language of a man trying to sound like he had consulted a lawyer when he had only scared himself with search results. "Samuel, your assertion that the workshop and utility areas are excluded from Denise's inheritance is rejected. The will clearly grants the Houston residence and related grounds to Denise. Ralph has been emotionally unstable since the funeral and is attempting to cloud title due to resentment. We intend to proceed with securing and clearing the property unless a court orders otherwise. Any further interference will be considered harassment of the rightful beneficiary." I read the words twice. Emotionally unstable. Resentment. Rightful beneficiary. Martin had not just misunderstood. He had escalated. Barlow's face hardened in a way I had not seen before. There it is. Evelyn closed her tablet with a soft click. "Hostile position after notice." Leland muttered something under his breath that I think was not meant for church. Barlow turned to me. "Ralph, I need to ask you plainly. Do you want us to pursue the buyback provision if they continue?" I looked at my father's photograph, then at Martin's email, then at Denise's texts. For a moment, I saw the funeral room again, the flowers, the ash box, Denise's hand over her mouth, Martin laughing before the attorney finished the sentence. My sister got the $14 million house. I got a rusted toolbox. 6 days later, I owned everything. This was the hinge. Not legally, maybe, but inside me. If I said yes, I was not just defending the workshop. I was starting the process that could take the mansion from Denise for far less than she believed it was worth. If I said no, I might preserve peace, but it would be the old kind of peace,
the peace bought by letting louder people take more space until quiet people had nowhere left to stand. My father had not told me to be cruel.
He had told me to be final.
Give them the cure notice, I said. Tell them exactly what to stop. Tell them exactly what happens if they don't. No tricks. Barlow nodded. And if they ignore it? I folded the photograph and placed it carefully in my pocket. Then proceed.
The cure notice went out before sunset. It was precise, almost cold.
Denise and Martin were to stop all attempts to access, alter, secure, clear, remove, destroy, sell, transfer, or claim authority over the workshop, utility parcels, pump corridor, records, machinery, and holding company assets. They were to withdraw the release document. They were to confirm in writing by noon the next day that they recognized the boundaries of the residential bequest. They were warned that continued interference would activate the holding company's remedies, including residence buyback under the 1996 covenant. Residence buyback. Those two words sat on the page like a loaded tool. At 6:30, I left Barlow's office. He wanted me to avoid the estate until morning, but I asked to stop at the workshop once, under supervision. Leland agreed to come. Evelyn stayed at the office to handle records. Barlow came too,
carrying a folder and wearing the grim expression of a man who expected foolishness and had rarely been disappointed. We drove in separate cars. The sun had dropped behind the ridge by the time we reached the Houston estate. The house glowed in the dim light, every window warm, every stone pretending nothing beneath it had shifted. Denise's Mercedes was near the front. Martin's Range Rover was back. The locksmith's truck was gone. We parked by the workshop. The original padlock hung on the door, slightly crooked but intact. Leland photographed it. Barlow photographed the door, the parcel markers, the service path, and the line of sight from the house. I stood a few feet away, breathing in cold cedar and metal. "You all right?" Leland asked. "No," I said. He nodded. "Good answer." The workshop door opened with the same old scrape. Inside, nothing obvious had been moved. The dust still lay on the bench. The third drawer still sat slightly open. The clean square remained near the vise. The empty space on the cabinet shelf looked darker in the evening light. I walked to the wall behind it and looked at the 4 pencil marks. 4 confirmations. I touched the wall lightly with 2 fingers. "You made it complicated, Dad," I whispered. Barlow, standing near the door, said softly, "He made it durable." I did not know whether that made it better, but I knew it made it true. Then the lights of the main house flared brighter. A side door slammed. Denise crossed the yard toward the workshop, Martin behind her, moving fast. Even from a distance, I could see anger in the way she carried her shoulders. Barlow stepped outside before she reached the door. "Denise, stop there." She did not. "How dare you come here with him?" she said, pointing past Barlow at me. "This is my home." "No one disputes your possession of the residence." "You are standing in my workshop." "We are standing on a holding company utility parcel." Martin came up beside her, red-faced. "This is insane. You people are bullying a grieving woman." Leland snorted. Martin turned on him. "Who are you?" "The man who knows where the line is." "I don't care where some imaginary line is." "That," Leland said, "is your whole problem." Denise looked past all of them at me. Her eyes were bright, but not with tears. "Ralph, tell them to leave."
I stepped into the doorway.
The workshop light was behind me. For once, Denise had to look into my shadow.
I can't do that.
Can't or won't?
Both.
This is because of the house, isn't it? You can dress it up in all this legal nonsense, but you hate that Dad chose me. Denise, Barlow warned.
No, she snapped. I want to hear him say it.
She turned fully to me.
You hated that I got the house.
I looked at her for a long moment. Behind her, the mansion rose against the darkening ridge. Beautiful, expensive, heavy with everything she thought she had won. I hated that you laughed, I said. That stopped her, just for a second.
I didn't laugh.
Martin laughed. You smiled. Then later you laughed too.
That's what this is about?
No. That's just when I learned how little Dad's death had slowed you down. Her face tightened.
You always did this.
Did what?
Act wounded so everyone feels sorry for you.
I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because even now she needed me to be small enough to explain away.
I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me.
Martin stepped forward. Then sign the release and walk away.
Barlow lifted one hand. Martin, I strongly advise you not to continue.
I strongly advise you to get off our property.
Barlow's expression went flat. Repeat that in writing if you wish to be helpful. Martin's mouth opened, then closed. Denise looked between them, sensing danger but not yet understanding its shape.
Denise, I said, you need to listen to Mr. Barlow.
No, I need you to stop this.
I didn't start it.
Dad left me the house.
Yes.
Then why are you trying to take it?
I'm trying to protect what he did not leave you.
That sounds like taking it.
No. Taking is claiming the workshop when you don't own it. Taking is telling me anything left here after Friday is abandoned. Taking is sending Martin to make me sign away tools, machines, records, and utility areas he never had authority over. Her eyes flickered toward Martin. There it was, the first crack. She had not read the release carefully, or she had let Martin write it and assumed force would make it true.
That document was just procedural, she said.
Then withdraw it, Barlow said.
Denise looked at him. What?
Withdraw the release. Acknowledge the workshop and utility parcels are outside your bequest. Confirm you will not interfere with holding company assets. Do that by noon tomorrow, and we discuss the next steps calmly. Martin grabbed her arm lightly. Don't say anything.
She pulled free. What happens if I don't?
Barlow's answer was quiet. The holding company may activate the residence buyback provision under the 1996 covenant.
Denise stared at him.
The what?
Martin said, there is no buyback provision.
Leland laughed once. You read one paragraph of a will and thought you understood 50 years of land work.
Martin glared at him, but Denise had gone still. Buyback, she said. At what price?
Barlow did not answer. That was worse than an answer.
Denise looked at me. Ralph? For the first time in 3 days, my sister said my name without contempt, almost like we were children again and she was asking whether thunder meant the lights would go out. I did not enjoy it. That surprised me. I had imagined in some hidden bitter corner of myself that her fear would feel like justice. It did not.
It felt like watching someone step onto thin ice after being told twice not to. You should read the notice, I said.
All of it. What price? She asked again. Barlow said, assessed agricultural land value. Martin went pale before Denise did. That told me he understood money faster than she understood consequence. That's impossible, he said. The house is worth $14 million. The residence may be, Barlow said. The covenant formula is not based on trophy value. Denise's mouth parted slightly. Daddy wouldn't do that to me. No one spoke. Because the truth was, my father had not done it to her. He had put the rule in place and let her decide whether to meet it. Denise stepped closer to me, lowering her voice as if the others were strangers at a family table. Ralph, you have to fix this. There it was again, the old pattern. Denise pushed, Denise took, Denise broke, and someone else was supposed to repair the room before guests arrived. I can't fix what you won't stop doing, I said. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Dad never explained. Dad spent his life explaining systems. You weren't interested unless they came with a chandelier. Her face flinched as if I had slapped her. I regretted the sharpness immediately, but not the truth. Martin recovered enough to speak. We're leaving. Denise, don't engage with this intimidation. He turned to Barlow. You'll hear from our attorney. Please have your attorney read the covenant before writing, Barlow said. Martin ignored him and pulled Denise back toward the house. She went, but she looked over her shoulder once, not at Barlow, not at Leland, at me. I could not read her expression. Anger, fear, betrayal? Maybe all three. The mansion lights swallowed her as she reached the side door. When it closed, the yard was quiet again. I stood outside the workshop and felt older than I had that morning. You gave her the chance, Barlow said. Did I? Yes. She thinks I'm taking Dad from her. Leland shook his head. No. She thinks Dad can only have loved the person who got the biggest thing. I looked at the house. Maybe she always thought that. Then maybe, Barlow said, that is the part your father could not fix. We locked the workshop and left separately. On the drive home, I did not feel victorious. I felt like a man carrying a lit match through a dry barn, careful not because he feared darkness, but because he knew exactly how much could burn. By morning, Denise had not sent the acknowledgement. At 10:17, her attorney sent a letter denying the covenant applied, accusing me of undue influence, and demanding that I cease entering the property. By 10:43, Mr. Barlow responded with the recorded parcel documents, the operating covenant, Martin's release, Denise's texts, Leland's affidavit, and notice of intent to activate the buyback. At 11:58, 2 minutes before the deadline, Denise sent me one text. You always wanted to erase me. I read it at my kitchen table with cold coffee beside my hand. Then I did something I had not done with any of her messages. I answered. No, Denise. I wanted you to stop erasing everything that wasn't yours. I sent it before I could make it softer. Maybe I should have let Barlow handle everything. Maybe silence would have been cleaner. But I was still her brother. And some words should come from blood before they become exhibits. At noon, the cure period expired. At 12:05, Mr. Barlow filed the activation notice. At 12:30, Evelyn Mercer transferred the operating accounts under my provisional authority. At 1:10, Leland recorded the parcel confirmation. By 2 o'clock,
The Houston Family Holding Company existed in the world not as my father's hidden machine, but as a live instrument with my name attached to it. Successor manager, conditional trustee, controlling vote. Words that sounded too large for a man who still drove a dented Ford and kept his wife's lavender alive because he did not know what else to do with love after death. At 3 o'clock, Barlow called me into his office. Denise's attorney had agreed to a meeting the next morning. "She wants to negotiate?" I asked. "She wants to avoid the buyback." "Can she?" "Yes, if you allow a settlement." "What kind?" "She keeps the residents under strict compliance, withdraws all claims to holding company assets, pays costs, grants access, and accepts oversight." "And if I don't allow it?" "We proceed to enforce the buyback." "Can we win?" Barlow looked at me for a long moment. "With the record we have, yes. It may take time, but yes." "Then why offer settlement?" "Because your father instructed finality, not cruelty. Finality can be a locked boundary. It does not always have to be a taken house." I leaned back. My father had left me power, then asked me not to become the kind of person who enjoyed using it. That was the hardest inheritance of all. That night I went back to the bank vault, alone. Evelyn Mercer took me downstairs without asking why. Box 417 opened with the same heavy ceremony. I did not need the maths or the ledger. I needed the photograph. I needed the letter. I sat in the private room and read my father's first page again. "She took the visible thing. You carried the useful thing." I tried to imagine him writing it, his hand shaking, his breath probably short, knowing he would not be there to explain himself, knowing I would sit in that funeral room and feel abandoned before I felt trusted. "Forgive me for making you carry the insult first." That line hurt more each time I read it because I could feel the apology trying to cross a lifetime of unsaid things. My father had not been an easy man to love. He made lessons out of tenderness because tenderness frightened him. He hid praise in photographs and inheritance in machinery. He taught me how to fix pumps, engines, and wiring, but not how to ask him, before it was too late, whether he was proud of me. Now he had answered in maps, keys, covenants, and a rusted toolbox. It was enough. It was not enough. Both things were true. I placed the letter back in the envelope and sat with the photograph in both hands. 16-year-old me looked serious and uncertain. My father stood beside me, not smiling exactly, but close. Behind us was the first proof, the machine I had helped him save without knowing it. I touched the words on the back. Ralph saw it before I did. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. The vault room gave no answer, but my own memory did. "Because you might not have believed him. Because he might not have known how. Because some fathers can build a system that survives 50 years, but cannot build one sentence before their sons grow old." I put the photograph in my jacket pocket and went upstairs. The meeting happened the next morning at 10 in Barlow's conference room, the same room where the will had been read. That was not an accident. Barlow said neutral rooms mattered. I think he also understood that some circles need to close where they opened. Denise arrived with her attorney, a thin woman named Claire Voss, who looked like she had already read enough to dislike her client's position. Martin came too, but he did not laugh this time. He wore a navy suit and a tie too bright for the room.
Denise looked smaller than she had at the funeral. Not humbled, exactly. Compressed. Her eyes moved to me, then away. Barlow opened the meeting by placing 3 documents on the table: the will, the covenant, Martin's release. "We are here," he said, "because the residence beneficiary attempted to claim authority over assets outside the residential bequest after notice and before estate inventory was complete." Claire Voss lifted one hand. "For the record,
My client disputes intentional misconduct.
noted," Barlow said. "For the record, your client was given an opportunity to cure." Claire glanced at Denise. "Also noted." Martin shifted in his chair. "This is ridiculous. We're talking about a shed." Leland, who had come as survey witness, looked at him from the far end of the table. "Call it a shed one more time and I'll bring the county plat books out by decade." Claire Voss closed her eyes briefly. "Martin, please stop speaking." That was the first useful thing anyone on Denise's side had said. Barlow slid the covenant forward. "The holding company is prepared to enforce the buyback provision." Denise's face tightened. "At agricultural land value." "Yes." "That would destroy me." "No," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. I had not planned to speak so soon, but there it was. "It would not destroy you. It would disappoint you. There's a difference." Denise stared at me. "Easy for you to say." "No, it's not easy."
That's why I'm saying it carefully.
Barlow did not interrupt. Claire watched me with interest. Martin watched me with dislike. Denise watched me like she was trying to find the younger brother she remembered and blame him for the older man sitting in front of her. "Dad gave you the house," I said. "He did. No one is pretending he didn't. But he did not give you the estate. He did not give Martin the right to clear the workshop. He did not give either of you the right to force me to abandon records and machines you never understood." Denise's eyes filled, but I could not tell whether from grief or rage. "You think you understood him better than I did." "No," I said. "I think I understood different parts." That landed harder than I expected. Her mouth trembled once, then steadied. "He shut me out." "Maybe." The word surprised her. It surprised me too. Maybe he did. Maybe he talked to me in machines because I could hear him there, and maybe that left you outside.
I'm not saying he was perfect.
Then why are you defending him?
Because imperfect is not the same as wrong. Martin leaned forward. This family therapy moment is touching, but the reality is Denise owns a $14 million asset and Ralph is trying to steal it through technicalities. Claire Voss turned to him. "Martin?" He ignored her. "No, I'm done being polite. Ralph spent his life doing small jobs and fixing pipes, and now suddenly he wants to play estate manager because he found some old papers in a basement?" The room went still. That was the voice from the hallway after the will reading, the laugh in sentence form. I looked at him and felt no heat this time, only clarity. "You're right about one thing," I said. "I fixed pipes." Martin smirked. "There we go." "I fixed pumps, too. Boilers, tractors, electrical panels, irrigation valves, drainage systems. The west pressure manifold under the pump room, the access corridor you tried to claim, the workshop door you tried to lock. The systems that keep that house livable, the systems that make the land valuable. The systems you called junk because they didn't look expensive from the driveway. His smirk faded. You saw a house, I said. Dad built an estate. That is the difference. Barlow placed the pump room photographs on the table. Evelyn placed the operating records beside them. Leland opened the map. Claire Voss looked at the documents, then at Martin, and whatever hope she had carried into the meeting seemed to drain quietly out of her shoulders. Denise did not look at the papers. She looked at me. "What do you want?" she asked. That question, more than any legal filing, opened the room. Because for the first time, my sister was not telling me what I felt or what I deserved. She was asking. I took a breath. I want the workshop protected. I want the pump room protected. I want the land structure protected. I want Martin to stop making decisions about things he doesn't understand. I want you to withdraw the release and pay the costs you created. Martin scoffed, but Claire silenced him with a look. Denise's voice was quiet. "And the house?" I looked at Barlow. He gave nothing away. This was mine to answer. "You can keep the residence if you accept the covenant and follow it." Martin exploded. "Denise? Absolutely not! That makes him your landlord." "No," Barlow said. "It makes the holding company the governing estate authority, which was already true before any of you entered this room." Martin turned on Denise. "Do you hear this? He's humiliating you." Denise looked at him slowly. Something changed in her face. Not redemption, not apology. Something smaller and maybe more useful. Recognition. "No," she said. "You did that when you laughed." Martin froze. The room froze with him. Denise looked down at her hands. "At the funeral," she said. "You laughed." Martin's jaw tightened. "I was trying to break the tension." "No," she said again. "You were enjoying it." For the first time since my father died, I saw my sister not as the polished antagonist in black, but as a woman who had mistaken a man's greed for support because both had been pointed in the same direction she wanted to go. The settlement took 3 hours. Denise withdrew the release. Martin was removed from all communication regarding estate assets. The workshop, pump corridor, utility parcels, operating records, and holding company instruments were acknowledged as outside the residential bequest. Denise agreed not to alter, sell, list, mortgage, encumber, or transfer the residence without holding company review. She agreed to pay locksmith costs, filing costs, and legal fees from personal funds, not estate accounts. She agreed to provide access as required for maintenance. The buyback provision remained active, but suspended pending compliance. It was not mercy. It was a boundary with teeth. When it was over, Martin left first. He did not look at me. He did not look at Denise either. Claire Voss gathered her papers and told Barlow she would send clean copies by evening. Evelyn left to prepare banking updates. Leland rolled up his maps, patted my shoulder once and said, "Your father would have grumbled about the paperwork, but he'd approve the line." Then he left too. Denise and I remained in the conference room with Mr. Barlow, who quietly excused himself after a moment and closed the door behind him. For the first time in years, my sister and I were alone without spouses, lawyers, parents, or property between us. Except, of course, property was everywhere, in the walls, in the documents, in the silence. Denise sat across from me, looking at the table. "Did he leave you a letter?" she asked. "Yes." Her face tightened. "Did he leave one for me?"
I did not know how to answer because the honest answer was no, and the kinder answer would still mean no. Not in what I found. She nodded as if she had expected it, but expectation did not protect her from the wound. He always trusted you more. He trusted me with systems. And me with what? Curtains? Denise, no, it's fine. But it was not fine. Her voice was too brittle.
I got the visible thing, right? That's what all of you think. Shallow Denise. Greedy Denise. Couldn't tell a water right from a wine cellar. I looked at her. You wanted to tear down the workshop. Martin wanted that. You let him say it. She flinched. Fair, but not complete. Dad didn't know how to love you the way you wanted, I said. Her eyes lifted. Don't make excuses for him. I'm not. I'm telling you something I think is true. She wiped under one eye with a sharp motion, angry at the tear for existing. He could have told me. Yes. He could have explained. Yes. He could have trusted me once. I looked at her for a long time. Maybe this was the once. Her face broke then, not dramatically, not with sobbing, but with a small inward collapse. And I failed. I did not answer quickly. You still have time not to keep failing. She laughed once, but it had no blade in it. That sounds like him. I know. We sat in silence. Then she said, almost too softly to hear, I shouldn't have laughed. No. I'm sorry. The apology came out rough, unused, and late, but it came. I nodded. Thank you. It did not fix everything. It did not resurrect my father, or erase the will reading, or turn Denise into someone new. But a system does not have to be perfect to stop leaking. Sometimes the first repair is just finding the crack. 6 days after the funeral, I stood in the old workshop alone. The settlement had been signed that morning. The holding company accounts were under my authority. The pump room records were secured. The buyback provision remained ready if Denise violated the covenant again. The house was still hers, but only as a house, no longer as a weapon. The estate, the land system, the water rights, the utility parcels, the workshop, the operating company, and the voting control belonged under my management. Not because I had grabbed them, because my father had left them where only patience could find them. I set the rusted toolbox back on the bottom shelf of the metal cabinet, exactly where it had sat before the will reading. The empty rectangle in the dust disappeared beneath it. For a moment the room looked complete again. I placed the old hammer handle, the dull drill bits, the rag, and the small wrench back inside. The bank vault key was now in a secure file. The 4-word note was folded in my wallet. Finish what we started. I touched the toolbox lid and thought about all the years I had mistaken my father's silence for absence. He had been speaking all along, just badly, through tools and tests and systems and locked rooms. That did not make the silence painless. It only made it less empty. Outside, Denise stood near the workshop door. She had asked permission to come in. That mattered. I turned and nodded. She stepped inside slowly, looking around as if she had entered a church built by someone she had never properly met. "It's smaller than I remembered," she said. "Most honest rooms are." She gave me a tired look. "You really do sound like him." "Occupational hazard." Her eyes moved to the toolbox. "Was it all in there?" "No, just the beginning.
And you figured it out.
Dad helped.
From the grave.
From the workshop.
She nodded. Then, after a while, she said, "What happens now?"
I looked around the room. The lathe, the drill press, the drawers, the pencil marks, the bench where something had once been removed. The place where my father had taught me that pressure drops before a seal moves. That a system tells the truth before people do. That careful men build things to show the next careful man how they open.
"Now we maintain it," I said.
"The house?"
"Everything."
She looked down.
"Can I learn?"
That question did what her apology had not. It reached somewhere old in me and unsettled it. I saw us as children for a second. Denise inside, crying because the power was out. Me outside, holding the flashlight wrong. My father between us, trying to keep the water running and never knowing how to keep his children from becoming strangers.
"Yes," I said. "But you start where I started."
She almost smiled.
"Where is that?"
I picked up a flashlight from the bench and handed it to her. "Don't point it where I'm looking. Point it where I'm going to look next." That evening, after Denise left, I walked alone down to the pump room. The sky had cleared, and the ridge was turning gold in the last light. The mansion stood behind me, impressive as ever. But it no longer seemed like the center of the world. It was only the visible thing. Beautiful, heavy, expensive, dependent. The real estate was underfoot, in old lines, buried records, water pressure, boundary markers, trust documents, and the stubborn memory of work done correctly by men who knew no one would clap for it. I unlocked the pump room and stood beside the main assembly, listening to the hum. For the first time since the funeral, I felt my father not as a wound, but as a presence. Not gentle, not easy, but near. I took the 4-word note from my wallet and unfolded it under the work light. Finish what we started. I understood now that he had not meant the legal fight. Not only that, he meant the land, the systems, the family, maybe, if there was anything left there worth repairing. He meant the work of keeping what mattered from being sold by people who only knew its price. I folded the note again and placed it back in my wallet. Then I checked the pressure gauge. The needle held steady. I smiled despite myself. "Still holding," I said aloud. The pump room answered in its low mechanical hum. On the drive home, I passed the front of the Houston house. Denise was standing on the porch, alone, looking out across the lawn that was hers and the land that was not. She raised one hand. I raised mine back. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. It was not trust. Not yet. It was a signal. And sometimes, a signal is where repair begins. When people in town heard the story, they told it wrong. They said my sister got the $14 million house, and I got a rusted toolbox. And then somehow, through some clever legal trick, I took everything. That version traveled fast, because people like revenge clean and simple. They like a villain, a victim, and a door slammed hard enough to echo. But that was not what happened. My sister got the house. I got the toolbox. Inside the toolbox was a key. Behind the key was a room. Inside the room was a map. Under the map was a machine. And inside the machine was the truth my father had trusted me to understand. I did not own everything because I was smarter than Denise. I did not own everything because I was more loved. I owned everything that mattered because I had been taught to notice what everyone else ignored. The rust, the seam, the pressure drop, the boundary line. The difference between a house and an estate. The difference between being left less and being left last. 6 days after the funeral, I stood in my garage with the toolbox open in front of me one final time before returning it to the workshop. I looked at the false bottom and thought about my father's hands building it, probably knowing I would find it, probably worrying I would hate him first. I did hate him for a while. Maybe only for a few hours. Maybe for 3 days. But grief makes time strange. Then I found the note. Finish what we started. And I understood. Dad did not leave me less. He left me last.